Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a price, $1 million man.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I'm joined by the $1 million man himself, Ted DiBiase. Ted, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Marcus. How are you today?
Man, I couldn't wish to be better, especially with this podcast, man. We are rocking and rolling. I'm enjoying every minute of it. I'm hearing a lot of positivity, and we've got a lot of fun in store. Before we get into what our subject is this week, I've been meaning to mention this on the podcast, and I have completely forgotten 3 weeks in a row. So let me just say it now here at the top of the show. That amazing theme music that you guys are hearing at the start of every episode of Everybody's Got a Pod was written and performed by the one and only Montezi. He is a very, very talented artist. He also wrote the entrance music for Sammy Guevara in AEW. He's done some stuff with the XFL. He's got a podcast of his own. It's called Swerve City Podcast. Wow. And the guy is just as cool as it gets. I couldn't be more happy to be partnered with him and have him write that music. Huge shout out to my dude Montezi for lending us his talents for that fantastic intro song. Ted, I know you dig it too, right?
Amen.
Well, look, we are back for our fourth episode of Everybody's Got a Pod here today. It's our very first edition, though, of Ask Ted Anything. So, Ted, we put it out on social media. Our listeners brought some really fun questions. I cannot wait to get into them with you. Awesome. Before we do, though, I just want to remind everybody that when this episode drops, the YouTube giveaway will be officially closed, and 12 winners will have been selected to receive autographed $1 million man merch. So if you haven't subscribed yet, don't worry. Go and subscribe right now at youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod, and you'll automatically be eligible for future giveaways. We will be doing more, and I've already got some really fun ideas in mind for future giveaways. So don't miss out. Like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell right now at youtube.com/everybody's-got-a-pod. So, Ted, the fans have got some questions. You ready to answer?
I hope so.
We'll get through them here.
So. I mean, I'm going on 70 years old, and they say that just naturally your memory starts to slide a little bit, but usually I can remember things that I did way, way, way back. I can remember some of that stuff better than I can remember what I did yesterday.
Man, the short-term memory for me is always where I struggle as well. But no, I'm with you. It's all right. We'll get through it. I know some of this stuff. So worst case scenario, I'll try to give a little more context, and we'll see if we can work things out. So the first question is from Jason Bayless. Is it true that Vince wanted Ted to make a return as an in-ring performer in 2005 as the $1 million man? This would have been around the time that he asked Arn, Steamboat, Mike, which is IRS, Fit Finley, and more. And if so, what were the plans for the character if you had said yes? Ted, do you remember that?
I don't remember Vince ever asking me to come back as an in-ring talent. I mean, what was it? What year did he say that was?
He said it was 2005 that he would have asked you. So you would have been working backstage in creative.
Yeah, I mean, and no, I don't think there was. I had gotten physically out of the business, right at about the 20-year mark, and for people who, some people that I know that know me know this, but for the people that don't know this, I chose to, I actually told my wife, I said, I am not going to stay in the ring actively too long. I'm not going to end up like my dad. And so right as I was just about to turn 40 when I got out of the ring. And I knew that I physically was capable. Physically, I still had it in me to continue, but I chose to, for that reason, get out of the ring.
So despite your neck injury, you in theory could have continued working.
Yes, yeah, I could have. But,
wow.
I just because that and again that added to my decision. Obviously, this thing happened. I said, you know what, I'm about to be 40 years old. I'm done.
Well,
So
let me ask you this: you took a bump not all that long ago with NXT. So I mean, with that being the case, was there any concern whenever you took that bump? Like, man, I could screw up my neck.
no, no. The thing about, and again, it was one bump.
Right?
The reason that my neck got to be the way it was, and there's been other wrestlers too that have had the same thing. I mean, same neck surgery, disc issues with their with the cervical, the lower discs, where your spinal cord meets your whatever head, your neck. There have been other guys that have had a similar surgery that I did, but no, I was. I just said no. I said, okay, this has happened. This should be a sign to me that it's time for me to get out of the ring, and I did. But yeah, no, I was never approached by Vince to get back in the ring.
Here's the other thing that maybe fans aren't considering, and I don't know. I'll ask you: were you had you cashed in a Lloyd's of London policy whenever you got injured?
Yeah, that was basically one of the things that enabled me to go ahead and do that at that time.
Right?
And what was funny about that was, it's kind of like, and I'm trying to think who told me about Lloyd's of London, and I was like, wow, really? And because I had no idea, and I was like, uh, I was almost shocked that Lloyd's of London, because I mean, for to be a wrestler and to be a wrestler at my age, and then they try to take out an insurance policy like that, you almost wonder if they're gonna give it to you, but because of what you do. It's kind of like, would you give an insurance policy to a NASCAR driver? Or,
Right?
it's kind of like, but anyway, I did have a Lloyd's of London policy, and because I did, it enabled me. In other words, if I didn't have that policy, I, even though I was making a good living, I wasn't really the $1 million man, and I wouldn't have been able to afford to quit.
Right? You would have had to keep going without
Yeah,
that policy.
exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, even if you had been asked to come out of retirement in 2005, you couldn't. You'd
No,
cashed in that Lloyd's of London policy, so
yeah,
you'd have to either pay that money. You'd have to pay that money back in order to continue working.
yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
interesting question though. Next up, we've got Patriot Dan on Twitter who asks, "How did the partnership with Sherri Martel occur, and what was she like to work with?"
Mm. Looking back, I can't remember whose idea it was to put Sherri with me, uh, but it turned out great. I mean, Sherri was wonderful. Uh, Sherri. She was like, it was like being with Sherri was like being with one of the guys.
Right?
That's the best way I can describe it. And plus Sherri legitimately, because if you know about her background and the things that she went through in life to get to where she was,
Man,
it was incredible.
hard road.
Hard road, hard life, and but to be as sweet as she was, it was, and it was kind of like with Sherri, I didn't have to encourage her, is what I'm saying. I didn't have to encourage her to do more. Actually, I had to kind of pull her back and say, don't do so much, because it kind of like wait for the right moments. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I've heard Jake say the same thing about working with Sherri, where he's like, man, she will steal the spotlight every single time if you let her.
Yeah. So, but she was great. Thought the world of her.
We'll talk in depth about Sherri sometime down the road. Ben Jones from Ad Free Shows asks, with regards to the basketball kicking incident, was the kid's family in on that, and did they receive anything after the show?
Of all the things and all the gimmicks that I have done over the years, the one that everybody remembers is the little boy and the basketball.
Yep.
And so here's here's the story. We were in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee. I mean, I remember asking the question. I said, "Well, what's Milwaukee famous for?" And somebody said, "Beer and basketball." And so I said, "Well, we can't do anything with beer. Let's do something with the basketball." And so I think it was I actually think it was Gorilla Monsoon's idea. Excuse me. And he said, "Let's get a basketball, and you dribble the basketball, and you tell a little boy, okay, let me see you dribble the basketball 10 times." And he does it. Yeah. And you could tell when he did it that, he was doing it, but, I was scared to death that at any moment he was going to miss. And I said, "Okay, if you could do that again 15 times without missing, I'll give you $500."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being the $1 million man, and son, I could tell you and your family need the money. What a jerk, right?
Right.
And so he's he starts with it, and he gets right. He gets to 14, and I didn't really kick the ball. I just put my foot under where the ball was going to bounce. made it bounce off of my foot, and I said, that's tough luck, kid. When you don't get the job done, you don't get the money, or you don't get paid. Now we rehearsed it, and in rehearsal, I was just being me. But when we do it live, I got to be the $1 million man. I got to be hardcore.
Right.
When I said, when you don't get the job done, you don't get paid. Oh, it scared him. He had crocodile tears. I mean, oh my gosh, he started crying.
Yeah.
He ran to his mother. I mean, he couldn't have done it any better. I mean, man, I remember getting backstage and everybody was going, "That was so good. Oh my gosh, that was great." And I said, "I'm glad you're all happy. Now find an armored vehicle to get me out of the building." I mean, those people they want to kill me. So fast forward 20 years. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I'm originally from. That was my home, or that's where the DiBiase's started, and my dad had a home, a household. Like when you're a wrestler's kid, you move around a lot. You lived in a lot of apartments.
Right.
But that was legitimately home, and so I had gone there to, it wasn't wrestling related. I think I had some kind of a speaking engagement. My ministry, that was what it was. And I had a speaking engagement related to my ministry, and I was renting a car. And so this guy taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and I'm gosh, like looking at his chest. Well, I'm 6'4". Well, I'm like 6'2" now, you get old, you shrink. But anyway, and I'm looking at this guy's chest. I look up, oh my gosh. And he said, "Hey, Mr. DiBiase," he says, "I'm the manager here. Can I help you find a car?" I said, "Yeah, man. And find something that would fit both of us." And he said, "I'd be happy to." And then he waited a couple seconds, and then he said, "By the way," he says, "do you remember that thing you did with the kid in the basketball?" And it was just the expression on his face. And I looked at him, and I went, "No." And he said, "It's nice to see you again." It was him.
No way.
It was him. What are the odds of that happening? And and I said, "Are you serious? Is it really you?" And he said, "Yes, it's really me." And I said, "Well, obviously you look like you're doing good for yourself." And he says, "You're going to love this, Mr. DiBiase." He says, "I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship."
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Oh my gosh. Right. And it was incredible.
What
So
are the odds? That is just
yeah.
amazing.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you get a photo with him or anything like
Oh,
that?
I did. And the other thing was I got his information, and I don't know how I lost it. I'm bad at losing things, especially when I'm out on the road. But I would have loved, and even now, if I could get if the WWE could get a hold of that guy, I mean, I know if I could have done something with him, like do this, like, yeah, hey fans, do you remember this? Well, now, now let me introduce you to this guy who used to be about this tall. Now he's, like a foot taller than me.
I'm already picturing you doing it to another kid and he intervenes or something like that. It would be tremendous.
But that was it was unbelievable. He went to college on a basketball scholarship.
Well, let me put
Crazy.
it out there. If he's listening to this right now, please reach out online at Ted DiBiase Pod. We'd love to have you come on the show. It would be incredible.
It would.
So, man, so that night though, did you go and talk to the kid afterwards, or were you just out of the building?
Oh no, we went and thanked him. I mean, like almost immediately after. And of course, and obviously the kid did get the money.
Yes.
It's like because I did a lot of things with different people, trying to prove that everybody had a price. I think one week I picked a girl out of the crowd and I got her in the ring and made her get on her hands and knees and bark like a dog.
You made Rob Van Dam kiss your foot.
Oh yeah, exactly. Rob Van Dam kissed my foot. I said, "Look what I did for him."
Skyrocket. I mean,
he kisses my foot. He loves wrestling, and eventually he becomes a big star.
Hall of Famer now. A coincidence?
Yeah.
I think not.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well,
and what was funny is when I didn't see. I heard that he got in the business and saw that he was doing well, but I can't remember where it was the first time we actually came face to face again. And I looked at him and smiled and I said, "Hey, I got another foot over here you can kiss." And he says, "Okay," he says, "but it's a lot more expensive now."
Man, shout out to Rob. He and actually my brother Dominic have a podcast on Premier Streaming Network, just like we do. So
yeah.
Shout out to Rob. Maybe we can get him to come on
That
for some
would
kind
be
of a
great.
bonus thing
That
at
would
some
be
point.
great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, here's a question. It's just for me. It's kind of related, but you with stuff like what you're doing here with this kid, and I mean all of your antics, kicking all the kids out of the pool, you were getting an awful lot of heat. And now I know that you and I talked about you having flash cash that you would kind of prove to people that you were, in fact, the $1 million man. But I'm wondering, with all the heat that you were getting, did you ever have to defend yourself against any angry fans?
I didn't. It never got that. It never got to that point. I can. I don't know. I can remember one time after a show, and I can't even remember where it was. And we would, especially if you were staying over, you go back to the hotel, and the hotel has a lounge, and go have a couple of beers and talk to the guys and get something to eat, and I think somebody smarted off about something, or I think it was more about you guys are all a bunch of phonies, and if you wanna make me mad, that's all you need to say. And I grabbed this guy by his shirt and I lifted him off the ground and had him against the wall, with his feet like a foot off the ground. And I said, "Does this feel fake? And do you want to feel any more?" And he shook his head, no, and I let him go. So anyway, but other than that, no, not really. I mean, like most of the fans, they knew that it was, basically Vince announced to the world that we were sports entertainment, so they knew it wasn't real.
Right.
So that was cool.
I mean, and for context for our listeners, I mean, those were the days when, like, you had just come from Bill Watts's territory where there was like an edict that was put out that, like, hey, if you get into a bar fight and you lose, you're out, you're fired.
Yeah.
So like, you would just come from that territory. So it's like that's a defend yourself, defend the business type territory. So totally understandable that you kind of jack this guy up. And by the way, Jim Duggan has told me some wild stories about getting into bar brawls alongside like Dr. Death and Hercules Hernandez, and man, it was the Wild West back in the day, was it not?
It was. Oh, it was. And I was with Jim on one of those occasions, and it was actually here. I live in the Jackson, Mississippi area, and I think it was in Jackson somewhere, and I can't remember, but he said that I get in the fight with this guy, and of course, Jim wears big thick glasses because he got that issue with his eyes. and I think his glasses were worn up, and he says, like he couldn't find the guy. The guy, he said the guy bit my finger, and the way the way Jim did it was he was kind of like he went like, oh, there you are. Now I know where you are, and and punched him, and then, 2 punches, and the guy was down. So.
Man, Jim Duggan, nothing to
Oh,
mess with,
no,
even to this day.
yeah. You gotta really be out of your mind to want to mess with somebody like Duggan.
My
And then
God.
Jim was legit, man. I mean, he played college football. I think he played a little pro for a while, like maybe a
Yep.
year or two, and then he came to wrestling. But he was always a legit. Thank goodness Jim Duggan is a nice guy.
That's what I was gonna say too.
Yeah,
Is
because of course, like guys his size and that strong that aren't nice guys. A lot of them, either end up in jail or dead.
yeah, or like will bully people, and that's what I was gonna say. Is like that's the other part of this is if you're pissing off Jim Duggan to the point where he's gonna fight you, you're doing something wrong because he is the nicest
Yeah,
person around.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, next up we've got Francis Reyes. What did you think of your Hasbro figure at the time? Ted, I've included a slide of this figure. I think this would have been like your second action figure with the WWF, with LJN being your first. Not necessarily this figure, but I'll ask you, what did you think of having, like, when you first saw an action figure of yourself? Like, what went through your head?
Oh my gosh! I mean, because they never tell us those things. No, they never announced to us that, oh yeah, by the way, we're gonna make action figures of you guys. Uh, I mean, the first time I saw one, I think I can't remember. I was either in a sporting goods store or I don't know, Walmart or something, and I'm walking through, and I went and I spotted that first one, though, the LJN,
Yeah, the big
yeah,
rubber guy.
big rubber thing,
Yeah.
and I was like, no way. I was like, and so, but since then, I mean, it's kind of like, um, you would think that the action figures, because we get, we get royalties off of all that stuff that's made in our likeness. But our cut is like really poor.
Yeah.
Really poor. But anyway, uh, what's funny is I make more money off of electronics, video games. I make more money as a royalty on video games than I do the action figures.
Really?
And those what are those little ones with they got the little buddy and the big head on them.
Yes.
Yeah, the Funko Pops.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many of those I have signed. And I tell everybody, yeah, that actually looks more like me. Slimmer body and this great big head.
Man, it's like you might not be making the money off of like the percentages or whatever, but pretty nice to fill up your gimmick table at these events with some of these action figures to sign, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, it's cool to see them still producing action figures of you. I know that there's one I think set to come out here pretty soon to like Target or something. But yeah, just it's got to be a weird feeling. What did your wife think the first time she saw an action figure of you or you on a magazine or something?
Well, she just shook her head. I can't believe it. And then she looked at me and she says, "Don't let it go to your head."
That's why we need women in our lives.
That's
keep us
right.
grounded.
Keep us straight.
Francis has another question following this one up. Do you have any wrestling items that you still own from your career? Any of your like gear you still own?
I have a few things, but I'm going to just throw it out there right now. What I have left is not for sale, and that comes directly from my wife's. That's what she said. She goes, like, because there's some things that I had given to charities to make money. They would raffle it off, or the highest bid gets it type of thing, in an effort to help charities raise money for special causes. But Now that it's down to, I think I've got one full suit left.
Wow.
And a couple of pair of wrestling tights, the tights with the dollar signs on the side, and I don't know. I might have one pair of boots left too. So,
Man, I
but
want to save that stuff for your grandchildren.
that's
You
it.
know,
That's it.
it's something they'll really appreciate. What about the loaded black glove, Ted? You still have one of those around?
You know, actually I don't, but I mean, what I would do when I first started doing that, uh, I was working for Bill, and that's when I turned heel. And no, I couldn't go out at that time and find a black glove like that. And the gloves that I got they were they were the kind of gloves that weightlifters would use,
Right.
and so they were all like, I can't remember what color they were, but I had to get like black, the liquid shoe polish, and I would paint them black so they'd be black. But I don't, actually, uh, uh, somebody found one of those. I don't know where they found it. It must have been one I discarded. But and I mean, I can't even remember the story now of where he found it. But somebody actually, I was doing an autograph signing at a Comic-Con or something, and he brought one of those gloves up for me to sign. I went, "Where did you get this?" Oh gosh, man.
Say, man, you might have to pick a couple of those up to put on your tables at these signings. I think they'd be a
Yeah.
big hit.
Hey, you know what? Good idea.
Could be a big hit.
Yeah.
Frank is up next. If not you, who do you think could have been the $1 Million Man? I've always heard Ric Flair has been thrown out there.
Yeah. I mean, Flair would have, it's like, Vince, like at the beginning when we started the thing with me, he said, he gave me this flash cash. He called it the flash cash. I always had $2,000 in brand new $100 bills in my pocket. Flair would have done it over the top. I did it, but with me, Vince didn't have to go, whoa. With Rick, he'd have to go, whoa. I don't know if he, yeah,
100%.
like, yeah, no, but legitimately, yeah, Rick is, I mean, that was his style anyway.
Right. Buying everybody at the bar drinks.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've also heard Gino Hernandez thrown out there. What would you think of him in that position had he not passed away, of course?
Yeah, he'd have been good. He'd have been good. Yeah, those
I
are two
don't
good choices.
I don't think you can beat the original, man. You were the right dude at the right time. Johnny Gringo is up next. What is your personal opinion of Bad News Brown?
Bad News Brown. I didn't know him well, but I got along with him. And I think that he was good. He was a good wrestler, good performer. I just I never, it's kind of like I didn't spend a lot of time with him. I mean, we saw each other on the road, we saw each other in the locker room occasionally, you know, uh, in a restaurant or at the bar in the hotel, but I didn't know him enough to, I didn't have enough of a relationship with him, but to say either, you know, personally, I thought he was a very nice guy. And work wise, his work in the ring, I thought was great. I had, no nothing bad to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, I've heard nothing but good things about the guy. Personally, I know that Jake was a big fan of his, and he
Yeah,
actually wound up leaving right after his rivalry with Jake. Or it was like a match at SummerSlam, and then he was just gone
yeah,
afterwards. Because I think that he was one of those guys who Vince had said like, "Hey, I could picture you as my world champion," and then it didn't happen, and he was like, "Well, he promised me the world championship, and I didn't get it."
Yeah.
So man, it's he's one of those what ifs, what could have been, because man, big guy, a lot of
Yeah.
talent, fun to watch, good promo. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
would have loved to have seen where he'd have gone. KJ Jado on Twitter asks, any funny Virgil road story or two?
Oh gosh. Um, I think one time, um, you know, we went to the hotel, and so I went in and everything. So he goes and he parks the car, but then later I just wanted to go. I wanted to go somewhere and get something, and so I took the car. By myself. We're already in the hotel. And he's going to go to bed, and I was going to, and so I went when I came back, and I parked the car in a different location.
Oh no.
And I went back and I gave him the keys. And so the next day he called me in a panic because the car's gone. The car's gone. Somebody stole our car. I said, what? So now, initially I got all like, well, how the heck did that happen? And then I remembered. I said, sorry, pal. I didn't mean to get you all beat up, but it's right over there. Because he went to get the car where it had been parked.
The previous spot.
Yeah.
Man,
But,
I can't. We're gonna do a full-blown episode on Virgil one of these days and talk about your full history with him. So I can't wait to do that. And next up, we've got Peter D. Did anyone try to legitimately hurt you in the ring? Ted, anybody ever take any liberties with you in the ring?
No.
Never.
No. And I don't know if that's because they were smart enough to know not to,
right?
Or if it was just out of respect for my ring ability. But no, I didn't know. Nobody ever, in terms of like trying to rough me up or no, I never had any trouble with anybody. The only, like I say, trouble for me in the ring would be with somebody who didn't get it, who was like, no matter what I told them to do, they didn't do it right.
Now, under those circumstances, Ted, if you're in the ring with, I'm just going to throw out a name that I assume you might be talking about, somebody like Ultimate Warrior, who had a history of being difficult to work with in the ring and kind of wanting to do his own thing. Are you throwing a stiff shot in there to try to like calm him down or set the tone, or how does that go?
Well, yeah. I mean, and even him, and my gosh, the time that I worked with him was like, it was such a short match, and I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't happy about it at all because number one, I didn't respect him at all. I didn't respect him at all because he had no respect for us. He had no respect for the wrestling business. For him, it was all a means to an end. And all the boys understood that. All the boys could see that. And I can't understand Vince. I don't know, maybe Vince's ego is, I'm going to take this giant muscle head and watch me make a star out of him. Because Vince thought he could make anybody, and to a degree he did. But I mean, that's just it. Unless the Warrior was in the ring with somebody who could lead him, he couldn't do anything.
Right.
And if you ever watch his matches, you can name the things he did in every match. He'd get in the ring and back and forth and shake the ropes and do his, puff and beat his chest, and that's it. Game over.
Right. And he was blown up before the match started because he'd come running down to the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, interesting kind of looking back, as a kid, I would see the Ultimate Warrior on TV and be like, oh, jacked up guy, face paint, crazy hair. Like, I like him, and that was kind of all it took. But then, as you start to get older and hear all the stories and just kind of see that, as you said, he's doing all the same stuff. It's lariats. It's like the big press. That's probably really dangerous to take. And there was nothing under the hood.
Yeah. He just, and that's it. The other thing is, growing up in the business like I did, first thing is you your first obligation is to take care of the other guy's body.
Yes.
In other words, if any, like, and because things happen where you slip or whatever, but in any way that you can, if something happens, you try to protect the other guy. And if both guys have that attitude, then everything's going to be okay. But
Yes.
when one guy doesn't care, and he didn't, he didn't care who he hurt. It was just, means to an end. And it was really sad. I just, the other, I don't know, I guess, and I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for Vince, but, the only thing I could think is, Vince is one of those guys is like, well, you don't like him, watch what I could make of him. And, he did make him a big star, but, his star power didn't last long because he couldn't do anything. He could do 4 or 5 things, and after everybody saw that same match over and over and over, you get tired of it. Let's go on to something new.
Absolutely. And then, not to mention, it's like, man, he was really starting to ascend, and then he starts issuing ultimatums to Vince, the boss, other talent. And it's like,
Oh yeah,
oh gosh,
hit the road, Jack.
yeah, ridiculous. Jake tells a story about how he had, before he was able to start a program with Warrior, he actually had to come to Warrior at Vince's request and ask permission to work with him. Insanity, letting the inmates run the asylum.
Yeah, Vince. I mean, I know Vince. Jake never told me that, but well, I'm sorry, but I mean, I got along with Marcus. I got along with everybody. And there's guys you really like, and there's guys and if you don't really like them too much, you just stay away from them. But I pretty much got along with everybody. And anytime that question comes up, is there any one guy that you just had no, and that's it? It's the Ultimate Warrior. To make somebody, go ask the guy if you can work with him. Are you serious? No.
Ridiculous.
That's going way too far.
Ridiculous.
And
man,
and I, what? And I would say that to Vince today.
You've got a guy like Jake who's a veteran talent. He established himself, proved himself over years, the territories, everything. And man, you'll have to ask Jake next time you see him around about that story, because Warrior's reaction whenever Jake comes and asks permission to work with him, man, it is unbelievable. We covered on my other podcast, The Snake Pit. So if you guys want to hear it,
Wow.
go ahead and go listen to that. But man, Warrior's reaction and the way that he treated Jake when Jake asked permission, just awful. So we'll move on. We don't have to bury Warrior anymore. Next up, we've got barbecue.
Well, but I mean, not Warrior, but Jake. One of the guys that I absolutely love working with is Jake. I mean, Jake was in my book, one of the top 10 ever.
Yep.
Ever. I don't know where I rank with him, but I mean, we've been friends a long time. And I mean, it was like working with Jake for me was like a night off. Like, what? Oh, this is going to be easy because we're just going to go out there and we're going to do the dance, because we both basically came from the same school of wrestling psychology and what wrestling was and how you, anyway.
I've heard him say the same thing about you. Working with you, it was like a night off. Always loved your work. And yeah, like a lot of people like to point to Jake and say like, oh, well, he's the greatest promo of all time. And it's like, yeah, he was a great promo. However, if you look at his ring work, just like the crispness of everything that he did when he was in his prime, man, the guy could go.
Yeah. He could go.
All right, next up, Ted, we've got Barbecue Dad 105. Does Ted have any fun Battle Royal stories?
Just that the biggest Battle Royal I think I was ever in, it's like, I remember I thought I was thinking battle royal. Like what's the big battle royal?
Royal Rumble.
The Royal Rumble. Okay, and I'm thinking, oh, it's the Royal Rumble. This is going to be a night off, and so. But I remember the day of the show. Pat Patterson came by and we were eating. Like they cater food for us, and Pat came by and he says, Ted, he says, if I were you, I wouldn't eat too much. I said, what? He said, you're going to be in there a while tonight. Be in there a while. I was the first guy in and almost the last guy out.
Oh my goodness.
And I can't remember which one it was. It was like, oh my gosh. I was like, because at the time, the way they did it, they didn't start with all the guys in the ring. They'd start with, and then every minute or whatever it was, you'd hear a buzzer and somebody else would run to the ring. I was the first guy, in the ring. And then they kept adding them and adding them and adding them. I mean, it was like almost, I don't know. You talk about wearing my butt out.
Man, that is a tall order for anybody.
I can't remember.
Was it 89? I want to say it was 89 or something.
I can't remember, but yeah, I was in there a long time.
Oh God, brutal. And I know that Flair had to do the same thing back when he won the Royal Rumble. He was in there forever, and it's like, man, you better have your wind right if you're gonna do something like that. Because holy smokes!
And of course, the guys help you too, because you get in there and there's, after a while, there's so many guys in the ring. The fans can only watch, collectively. But there were guys, a lot of the guys that helped me in terms of, like even they knew, okay, they grabbed me and say, okay, Ted, let's go over here in this corner and let you rest a little for a minute.
I've heard a lot of people say that the strategy when you're in a battle royal or a Royal Rumble is like just find a corner and rest as long as you can. That way you're not going to catch an elbow or a knee from anybody too, and then you can kind of get back out and get into the action a little bit. So
yeah,
and
the other thing is you got to be careful what you do, because there's so many bodies in the ring. You got to be careful. I mean, it'd be real hard to pick a guy up and just body slam him, because you got, once there's like 20 people in that ring, how do you do that?
Yeah, you're stuck just kind of brawling with that many people.
Right. Yeah. So, but it would always get down to the last like 4 or 5 guys, and then they would have a strategy as to what they would do and how they would do it, which made it exciting.
And to this day, one of the fans' favorite events, the Royal Rumble, every year. So it speaks to the quality of the idea from Pat Patterson.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got Michael McClanahan. What were some of the challenges associated with pulling off the $1 Million Man gimmick? How do you believe the character would translate in modern audience? So that's kind of 2 questions. So was there any challenge to doing the gimmick? Did you find that being a heel in that capacity kind of came easy?
I did. I mean, it's kind of like, when I was on the road, it's kind of like, it's like I didn't live the gimmick in terms of just, like everyday daily life. Like when I walked through an airport or something, and if somebody spotted me, obviously a lot of people recognize, celebrities when they walk. I mean, I've recognized celebrities walking through an airport. Oh God, that's what's his name? But I don't know him. I didn't walk up and approach any of them, but because it's kind of like, like me, and I appreciate fans, and I'll be honest with you, if fans approach me in the airport or wherever, a restaurant, as long as, for example, now if I'm sitting at a booth or something, and it's obvious that I'm having dinner, and I want my privacy, I don't appreciate people just walking right up to the table. But I've had people where I'd go in and I would have dinner, and I would walk out, and walking out, these fans were such big fans. They waited. They waited outside and paid me the courtesy of not interrupting me.
That's the right way.
And I said, what else you have to sign? I said, I may not, if you show me that kind of respect, you got three things, I'll sign it all. That was kind of like my attitude. But no, I had no. Uh, uh, there wasn't much trouble being the $1 million man the way Vince wanted me to be. I mean, it's kind of like uh, I stayed at really nice hotels and the limousine service. Of course, the limousine service, what didn't continue to be limousine service. Then when the limos were over, then he said, when you guys are rent like rent a big car, like a big 4-door car, and travel that way. But otherwise, and again, the money, of course, all those perks that started the character, in like, when I am seen in public and, oh man, that guy, he was in that restaurant, and he picked up everybody's tab and all those, that was Vince wrote all that off as marketing the product. And
Absolutely.
of course, once the character was well established, then those things went away, and then I was like everybody else, doing
I
my
mean, pretty easy gimmick to sink your teeth into if you think about it. Like, hey, I'm gonna put you in this limousine, give you some flash cash, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm sure that the transition from loaded black glove Mid South Ted to $1 million Ted
yeah,
is not
oh
not
yeah.
a tough one.
But I mean, and everybody goes, who else do you think could have been the $1 million man? I said Vince. I said I
There's
believe
the answer.
if Vince could be a character in his own program, that's who he would have been. And it only makes sense.
There's the answer. Is yep. That's it. It is Vince McMahon. I've heard the stories about him paying some guy $500 to put out a cigarette on an airplane at one point because he didn't want to smell it. It's like that's the $1 million man.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep, yeah,
uh,
yeah. I know that story too, and that's right. That's what he did.
Incredible,
Yeah,
incredible. A couple more,
and he
Ted.
did
Then
it, and he did it. He did it to prove. I mean, he did it to prove it to
Bruce.
not Bruce. It was Pat Patterson. Everybody's got a price. Let me show you. That's how he did it.
Just amazing, man. Next up, we've got Joe Ness, who asks, besides Doc, who was your best partner and best opponent in Mid South?
In Mid South, wow. Well, obviously, Steve Williams was my best partner, and I know that uh, the Cowboy put Doc with me because it's kind of like when you want to help somebody along, you know, same thing was done to me. I was put in matches with different people when I was young and just starting, but I was put in matches with those people so I could learn. And and Doc was unbelievable. I mean, here's a guy who in college was a two-sport athlete. You don't do that in college anymore. I mean, for the longest time, I was given a scholarship to play football at West Texas State. I was a football player. That's it. Steve Williams played football for the University of Oklahoma, one of the top universities and football teams anywhere. And he also wrestled.
Man,
He was a two-sport athlete in college. It's just incredible.
just a
So
freak athlete.
I love but Doc picked up the business. He was good. And I'm trying to think of what it was that something happened. I can't remember where we were going. I think we were up in Oklahoma driving somewhere, and somebody did something. Somebody like cut us off or did something, and Doc, he just made him so mad. He went around. He actually went around them on the wrong side of the road, like on the yeah. on the
Yeah.
shoulder, gets in front of him, and he says, put your seatbelt on, and he slams on brakes, and this car came up and just missed hitting us. It was like,
Whew,
and
man.
Doc gets out of the car and he's just cutting a promo on all these, and you can see the expression on everybody's face in that car. They're rolling up the windows, they're locking the doors and everything, and he's cutting a promo on them. And finally, he just goes with his hand, wham, and right in the middle of the hood, he hits the hood of the car and puts this gigantic dent in it.
Oh my.
And then we just get in our car, and we pull away, and he looked over at me like a little kid and went, kind of like, ah. But anyway, those are some special moments. But yeah, I loved working with Doc. What was the question? I go back to the question.
Your favorite, and thank you for that story. It's incredible. Just
Yeah.
picturing Doc, because he had that huge hair and the big beard. He looks like a
Oh, yeah.
Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And just picturing that guy coming out and cutting a promo on you, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be trying to speed off. But the other question was, besides Doc, who'd you like teaming up with, and who's your best opponent in Mid-South?
Oh gosh. Besides Doc,
You teamed up with Duggan back during like the Rat Pack days, right?
yeah, I was gonna say the Rat Pack. Duggan, for sure, and then I think um, wasn't there somebody under that mask? The Grappler,
Oh, Len Denton.
Lynn Denton. Lynn Denton, doesn't get the credit that he deserves. I mean, he was great, man.
Yes.
And I remember I had gone to Japan. Now you have to understand, Japan. It's like it's a 3/4 shoot in Japan. In other words, it's a work, but they lay him in. You know what I'm saying? Everything looks really real because it's a half shoot. And so I had just come back from Japan, and I have this match with him, and for whatever reason, I kept potatoing him, just not intentionally, and so finally he rolled out. He rolled out on the floor, and he looked up at me, and he said, "Hey, you're back in the USSA. Loosen up." It was all I could do to keep from just cracking up in the middle of the ring.
Man,
he was great though. He was really good.
I've heard nothing but good things about Len Denton.
Yeah.
Man, I know that he was out at WrestleCon recently out there in LA, and Jake said that he was happy to see him. He's still out there getting it done, man. I would love to get him on one of our shows one of these days.
Yeah, he's good. Back to that question. Who did I love working with? I didn't more than anybody in Mid-South. I got to be very close friends with Junkyard Dog.
Oh, nice.
I mean, enough so that JYD was the best man when my wife and I got married.
Really?
And, yes, and when we first met each other, we were both baby faces, and eventually, of course, I turned. I had the most fun and the biggest run with JYD that you could ever imagine. Yeah. So, and I'm trying to think of, the first time I wrestled him after I turned on him. Oh my gosh. After I turned on him, the first time I wrestled him in New Orleans was just unbelievable.
Oh man.
It was kind of like, it's like I told everybody, I told the guys, I said, look, I'm not going to drive my car to New Orleans. So why? I said, because it'll be on blocks when I come out. The wrestling fans took their wrestling really serious. And I had, I just turned on my best friend basically. And so Grizzly Smith, Jake's dad, who was like the agent for Bill Watts, He says, okay. He says, you just ride with me. So I rode with Grizzly Smith to New Orleans, and so me and JYD go out. We have the match, and of course, this is like the first time, and I beat him again illegally somehow because we're going to have another rematch and come back and sell it out again, right? And so I go back and I shower and I come out and I'm getting dressed, and old Grizz comes walking in there, and he got his hands on his hips and just looking at me and shaking his head. I said, what's wrong? He just shaking his head. I said, something wrong with the match? He says, no, damn it, the match was great. I said, well, what's wrong? He said, they slit my tires, all 4 of them. I said, see? I said, they just slit your tires. I said, I wouldn't have had any tires on my car. That's a true story. Oh my gosh. So that took us a while to get out of New Orleans that night.
Man, it's to put into context what a star he was, he being Junkyard Dog in New Orleans,
Yeah.
like Elvis level popularity.
Oh yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Like a
I mean,
massive,
in
massive
New
star.
Orleans, I don't think there's anybody, I don't care what they do, I don't think there's anybody more popular than the Junkyard Dog was. I mean, the New Orleans Saints, there wasn't a football player. There wasn't anybody more popular than JYD.
Man, it's such a great performer, and I can't wait to look back. I mean, look, somebody online said recently, like, "Hey, when are you going to cover more of? We're only covering WWF stuff on this podcast. When are you going to cover more?" It's like, buddy, we've got a long ways to go and a lot of story to tell. We're going to be talking about Mid-South, your rivalry with him. I can't wait to talk about the tuxedo match with Jim Duggan, Japan. I mean, buddy, we've got an awful lot to cover, and I can't wait to get into it. All right, Ted, last question, and then I'll let you go. And actually, I'm just coming up with this one on the fly because we brought up Matt Borne. I've heard an awful lot about him over the years, maybe kind of a wild guy at times, a partier. Give me your best Matt Borne story. I know you've got to have at least one.
Oh gosh, brother. Um, it's like my best Matt Borne story is like him almost getting in a shoot fight with Hacksaw.
Was that was not all that long ago, right? Like 10 years ago or something? 12 years ago?
Well, I think it was a little longer than that, but I mean,
Was this in Mid-South? Did they got into a shoot
yeah,
fight? Oh, okay. Yeah, so
yeah.
they did it a few years ago, well, like 10, 12 years ago at like an indie event where it was like it turned into a shoot in the middle of the ring. I don't know if you've ever seen that footage.
Well, that's because that whole Matt, he was a good worker, but he had an attitude,
Mm-hmm.
and Jim hated it, man. He just and they almost came to Fist City, in Mid-South, and so I'm sure whatever happened, how long ago?
Man, I'm probably gonna get killed online for not knowing the exact year. It
Well,
may have been like 2009, 2010, somewhere
yeah,
in there.
but wherever that was a hangover.
Yeah.
Was a and I get it. I mean, uh, I understood Jim's angst with Matt. Matt was a good worker, but just he just had an attitude about him that wasn't the best.
Yeah, it's rest in peace to Matt Borne. I'm sure he's a lovely human being. I've never had the opportunity to meet him before
Yeah,
he passed, but yeah, I mean, from everything I've heard, like, man, the guy could be really volatile, kind of living life on the edge,
yeah,
and like,
yeah, yeah,
when you start doing that, you're messing with people's money.
yeah, yeah. And that's it. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. Like I said, great in the ring, great worker, but it's like it takes more than just being a great worker. You got to get along with everybody, and there's got to be compromise sometimes, and it wasn't there.
Well, we'll tell more Matt Borne stories down the road because we are going to do a Rat Pack episode. I want to get Jim Duggan on this podcast to do that. I've got all kinds of plans and ideas.
Well, you might have to do that because when we start talking like that, it's going to take Jim to help me remember some of these stories.
Man, just picturing hosting a podcast with the two of you telling stories. So I cannot wait. We're going to make it happen one of these days here. And by the way, these questions, we're not done yet. You know, this entire, I've still got a whole document full of questions from fans.
Wow.
I'm going to keep them all. And
Okay.
I'm gonna do it for the next episode of Ask Ted Anything. So I can't wait to do more of it. And Ted, man, I appreciate you joining me today, and I know that the listeners do too.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week, but in the
Okay.
meantime, we'd love to have you guys follow us on social media at Ted DiBiase Pod on all social media platforms. Follow Ted at MDM Ted DiBiase on all his social media. Follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on Twitter, and follow Premier Streaming Network at Watch on Premier on Twitter and at Premier Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. While we're on the subject of Premier Streaming Network, I also just want to give a reminder that if you'd like to get this podcast on video with no commercials and get access to a ton of sports, entertainment, and other shows, get over to premierstreamingnetwork.com. Sign up for Premier Plus, and I can guarantee that if you're a fan of wrestling, sports, entertainment in general, you're going to find something that you like over there. So go and check them out. Like I said, RVD's got a podcast there. Sabu's got one. I have a buddy named Efren who hosts the game event over there, which is a wrestling game show. So, I mean, there's something for everybody. You got to check it out. Again, it's premierstreamingnetwork.com. Ted, this was a fantastic episode. I cannot wait to continue the story of your time in wrestling here on Everybody's Got a Pod.
Well, thank you very much, fans. And fans, remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. See you next time.
That's it, guys. We'll see you next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.